Last time on Lila Talk.
We aren't really gauging the magnitude of what certain demographics of our population are willing to do to preserve their freedom.
Yo, now we're not old.
Right.
We're wise. You know what I mean? We've been around long enough to be wise, but don't get it twisted. Like, I'm a representation of the NAACP.
Yeah.
I think it's a step in a direction, one, toward the browning of America, if you will, and also the fact that we're in the age of women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your time.
I love that. Lila, let's talk.
I'm sorry, we're talking about census. I ain't
Coming back to five.
Is it on?
4, 3.
Lila, let's talk.
Yeah, we're back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yay. So Gene, you're just explaining to us the importance of the census.
Yeah.
And why people should fill it out and why do we make sure that we have to
billions
have
of reasons why you should fill it out. But so the thing that I was thinking about is like, yo, we were taught in our community, especially underserved and underprivileged communities, that this was like an invasive act. It was like, my grandma was like, we're not answering that, we're not filling out, we're not giving them our information, as if your information was something you needed to covet, right? And so now, especially with the NAACP, they're running a constant Be Counted campaign, talking about the importance of being counted. Like, yo, when you hit that pothole and you mess up, I don't drive, so whatever you mess up when you hit potholes, that's a census thing. Funding for your schools, that's a census thing. Funding for your neighborhood park, like
The road so you can be on the pothole. So you can
right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's so many things in your day-to-day life that's affected by the census. And when you talk about systemic racism, it always baffles me about all the things that we were taught to not be a part of. Like literally taught, not just, they left it up to chance. We were taught to not be a part of these things. It's ingrained in us. There's somebody's grandmother is out there right now who still has money in the mattress. You know what I mean? Like that, I never forget, my mom told me when she was helping my great grandmother, who was blind at the time, clean out some things, she found $20,000 in like a box. It's like, one, grandma, you can't just go deposit this money now because, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Taxation, representation, all of that. But it's like it's just that fear of being a part of a system that isn't geared to help you. And so you got so many people that have been fed misinformation for like Trump isn't the beginning of misinformation. It's not the beginning of alternative facts. Like we've been getting alternative facts for 400 years, and probably before then, right? And so I mean, it's just so important for people to, and especially in these times when you have everything at your fingertips, to engage and understand why they're trying to keep us away from this, and then we can participate.
You're explaining to the census, like you see that road right there, you see the school funding that you're not getting. It's because they think that you only have 10,000 people in the school district, but you actually have 20,000. Why do you think you got why are you short 10,000? Because you didn't fill out your census. And so that's why that's why these things are.
That's good. I'm glad you guys bring that up.
CBC boot camp.
Boot camp.
So
I'm a product of the boot
exactly
camp.
yes, and so they produce a
okay.
layout. And so one of the things that they produce. So if you think of the CBC Foundation internship program as sort of a pipeline to Capitol Hill, the boot camp is essentially a pipeline towards folks to work on campaigns and political involvement. And so that's and so you get dozens of people that come throughout the country that are in this program every year. So they train the next generation of political leaders. So if you talk about local and again not even just federal campaigns, you talk about state, local, and federal campaigns. So it's this how to engage into media on a campaign, how to do direct mail and all these different facets, and that's something that they do. I'm from an era, and that's why I love G, because he's like little brother. I'm old head now, but I remember at a time when I started, and back when Angela got there, like we were some of the only black people on Capitol Hill. Like there's an organization called the Congressional Black Associates. I got to Capitol Hill in 2003, and literally you could go to CBA meetings and it might be like 10, maybe 15 people.
Wow.
It was nobody there. Like
Wow.
you could meet a girl out on the street, like, hey baby, I work on Capitol Hill. And it's, oh my God, it was like she saw a unicorn.
Yeah.
In these one places. There was nobody. There was nobody.
This wasn't that long ago.
There was
really.
there was nobody black that was directly affiliated that you could point to, that you could touch on Capitol Hill. So it was like, you know, around 2006 when Democrats took back the majority a while ago, and we gave it back shortly thereafter. But when we took back the majority in 2006, you started to see an influx of African Americans and just start to have more of a conversation about just us in the political space. And in 2008, when Obama won, you started to see even more. And so it was this like beautiful thing. And so, you know, initially when folks came in, it felt like, you know, there was this whole notion of like competitors. Like, no, like, look, if you eat, we all eat. And there's enough resources to go around for everyone.
Absolutely.
You know, it's more than enough resources.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I'll say too. Like, I was blessed to meet people with that mentality.
Yeah.
Like, say what you want about Angela, however anybody feels about it. I know for a fact her mindset is always about looking out for the folks, looking out for black folks, making sure that there's a voice for black folks in every room that we walk in.
My time on Capitol Hill, like I've always been like, look, you know, I'm real humble, but you want to learn about what I got, what I'm doing? Come on, come on. This is what I do, and I think that there has to be that, you know, that a culture of a culture of mentorship and a culture of just inclusiveness amongst people without a fear of, you know, relinquishing power or stature or what have you. And I think that's something that, you know, a lot of us are gonna, because if you don't have that, what you're gonna end up getting is just, you know, a butting of heads, you know, where folks are feeling like, oh, well, you're out of touch, and you're out of touch, and you're not respectful or deferential or even understanding of the process, and that doesn't work. You know, that doesn't work for the cohesive goal what everybody's trying to accomplish.
One, I completely agree with all of that, and it's better to be a kingmaker than to be a king. And so with that, like, and I won't shout everybody out, but Ben and a conglomerate of OGs like took me and a bunch of my peers under the wing. Like, yo, this was our thing. Now we're passing it to y'all. And not even like, yo, y'all are gonna run this. I don't even know. That's why I don't even know. I don't even know if it was really an ask of more of a, yo, y'all are gonna run this. And the creation of those kind of pipelines, I always want to show love to Congressman Benny Thompson, and not just because that's where I kind of got my political start, but being a cat from New York, like, I'll be honest with you, like, growing up, I didn't know my member of Congress. I knew Marty Markowitz because he came to my school and talked, and he was the guy that did everything, and when something was going on, Marty was always there. But when it came to working around Congressman Thompson, Mississippi has a pipeline. You know what I mean? And like, at this point, this nobody's position to beat Congressman Thompson, but he wouldn't be mad if they did, because they're groomed. It's like, no, we need to make sure that all of our people are represented, and he knows that he can't do it on his own. And so watching that system, and you talk about the Trey Bakers of the world and the Corys of the world, and my boss now, Derek Jones, is a mentee of Congressman Thompson. You know what I mean? And so, like, literally creating those pipelines, and you know, full transparency, CBC members need to do a better job of that. We need to make sure, and you know, God forbid, like, a lot of them are up in age, like up in age. You need to make sure that there is somebody in position, and not just to take the position, but to do the work.
Because what ends up happening if, you know, God forbid something happens, or, you know, to one of these members while they're in office, or, you know, like John Lewis, what have you, but, you know, he passed after the primary, but, you know, what you've seen before when, you know, things happen to these members, if there's not somebody who's groomed, or there's not, like, you know, some sort of, you know, contingency plan for that, you got 25 people
Vying
running
for
And
vying
no
for
one
the
has
same
had
office.
that time to kind of build
And
their brand,
so you
their
have
awareness.
sort of-
And it's more about them than the people.
Yeah, and-
When you're a part of the pipeline, it's the larger concern is the people. Like, you know, of course,
That's for
everybody
the people.
everybody wants to move up and bump up and get a
Right.
raise and be a part of it. But the larger goal is the people. When you leave it to the wolves, the wolves are just gonna go at it, and it's like you don't know the people don't know the person to trust.
And to be real, what ends up happening with that is that once you do have this infighting, it leaves this lane for other people who might not necessarily have our interests at hand to kind of come in with a small majority and you know, win elections, to distract, deter, to change the whole narrative of what of what the intention is for the people.
Right.
You know.
If it's 25 people who are in one area and they want to do the work, right? We can find positions for all these 25 people. But if one thing happens and there's no longer any leadership, and these 25 people are going for the one spot, one, it's a crazy fight. But then two, it's 25 other positions that now are left to chance, and now, you know, the enemy, so to speak, can infiltrate due to that weakness.
What was kind of the passion or the motivation that wanted you to kind of run for office? And, you know, why are you still doing it now?
Well, I was influenced by my grandmother. She was in public office, but I didn't grow up wanting to be a politician. I saw myself in the entrepreneurial space and entertainment space, and it was through my young activism I was inspired. I always thought growing up that outside instigation brought about change, but it wasn't until I grew older I realized that you needed outside agitation and inside instigation to produce legislation.
I like that.
Bars.
Yeah.
To really influence society. And it's not absolute. You can be an agitator, you can be an instigator, you can be a legislator, or you can just tweet about stuff in your mom's basement. But if you're an American, you have a voice. And if you don't exercise your voice in the form of voting, then it's impossible to really be critical of this system if you're not participating.
Yeah. And then why do you think it's so important to have kind of a diverse legislative group here at the Hill, you know, whether people of color, women, why do you think, or do you think we need more of that, particularly in today's society?
Well, we have a diverse society. Our diversity is growing each and every day, and I think that diversity should be reflected in city councils, on school zoning boards, in general assemblies, in Congress, in the White House, in governor's mansions. I think that to have a society where we pay taxes, to not have representatives who look like us to be stewards over our taxpayer dollars is nonsensical.
Yeah.
You know, normal folks, average folks, talk about the importance of Black people supporting other Black people, whether it's tax, whether it's elections, because there might be someone out here right now who might want to run it, you know, they might want to talk to CBC or NAACP. How would they go about some assistance?
See, the NAACP is nonpartisan organization. I want to be clear on that.
Okay.
That's not our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But
well, I get really excited when I talk about money and politics.
Me too.
In terms of Black people in that space, because when I started at the CBC PAC back in 2013, it was sort of a taboo subject, and it was just kind of like one of those things where a lot of people that I had spoken to, especially younger people, the first time that they'd ever given money was for President Obama, and they just didn't really get the notion of where the money was spent, how it was spent, and what it actually does.
Yes.
I was just very unapologetic about letting people know, no, y'all got to get in this game too. Like, we have to be in this game, because if not, we just have no voice. And so, when I mentioned some of these other groups, like, like I said, Collective, Higher Heights, Black Economic, a lot of these different groups, what they've been able to do is support these candidates of color on a local, state, and federal level, not just members of Congress, but local. And again, a lot of these races aren't as expensive as $1 million.
I think that's what a lot of people think. They think they have to have 20, 50, 100,000, $1 million. They see these federal numbers of the media. They get intimidated.
Let me tell you, one of my favorite stories, elected stories, was
now Congresswoman-elect, Congresswoman Johanna Hayes. And, I remember when she was running, she had no real infrastructure. She had, she was a National Teacher of the Year. I forget what year she was, but she was National Teacher of the Year, and she was out of Connecticut. And National Teacher of the Year, and she was running and had no real infrastructure. She had no real backing from the party, and she had no real money. And she ran a campaign largely based on her initial campaign was largely based on social media and very grassroots. And it eventually ended up catching on, and then the money came later, and then she ultimately ended up winning her primary, and then she won the election. Another one of our favorites is Lauren Underwood, who is the youngest African American female ever elected to the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
And I remember, we had when I first met Lauren, a couple years ago, it was probably, I don't know, like 3 years ago. I remember I met her, and I said, well, look, she has she's very well qualified. She was actually a nurse. She was an adjunct professor. She was an HHS. But I remember when I talked to her, I was like, well, what kind of, how much money he raised, which kind of money he raised. She was like, not a lot. She worked at grassroots, and the money ultimately came later, because again, everything starts locally. So that's why I can't stress enough the importance of having.
And even getting experience, right? Starting this city council and kind of working your way up,
exactly.
correct?
Exactly.
So here's the thing, just as a social media strategist, let me just chime in on this point. The establishment is behind the times. And so there are a lot of people who believe that there is a structured way to do things and a structured way to win. Social media is a game changer. And if I give you access to the people, you still got to raise some money. You still got to do some ads. You still, especially when it comes to black folks, you're not going to get a fair shake. Get that.
Yeah.
Like you should accept that before you even get in the game. You're not going to get a fair shake. The 10 times harder, et cetera, you're going to have to. But we are in a prime position to play the game that we are best at.
And one of the things that I really want to point out that's critically important to note here is that, especially if you're talking about people of color, there is such a gap between the amount of money that candidates of color raise and white candidates. I remember I spoke on a panel a couple of years ago, and I was just talking about just simply the financial services committee, right? And I asked people, and there was a mixed crowd of people. I said, because I was talking about campaign finance and money and stuff, and I said, and I was at Harvard actually, and so I was in Massachusetts. I was in Massachusetts, but I was a congressman from Massachusetts, Stephen Lynch. I said, how many people know Stephen Lynch? A few people knew who Stephen Lynch was, and we were just talking about comparative money between black people and white people, black members of Congress and white members. And I said, how much money do you think he's raised? And they threw out some numbers, and there's a big difference between PAC money and individual money, right? And so, I forgot the number, but I want to say it was individually maybe and this is individual dollars. This is, I think at the time, the maximum amount you can give to a congressional candidate, I don't know, maybe $2,700, right? $2,700 at the max. I think he was at maybe $1 million or something, some astronomical number. And I said, now.
And that's even a workaround.
Yeah, again, don't quote me on a number.
No, 27 is right, but it's a workaround because an individual may give 27, that individual's company may give, the wife may, it's a workaround.
But check. But here's the kicker. Okay, he's a subcommittee chair on the Financial Services Committee. The chairwoman, Maxine Waters. You know how much she raised? It was maybe $280,000.
Wow, really?
Crazy. That's the point. That's the point. It's just that
amazing.
It's such a contrast between the amount of money that members of Congress, that African American members of Congress of color raise versus their white counterparts. Because you look at their congressional districts. Benny Thompson, for example, the amount of money that he's going to be raised individually in Mississippi is not going to be the amount of money that I don't know, Carolyn Maloney, whoever, one of these other members of Congress in New York or somewhere place in a fluent area is going to be able to raise. And so we have to support those people that are going to support our interests. Just as we're going to give, just as folks were able to give money to Obama and everybody else, you got to give money to your local, and again, local races are even cheaper than that. So, you know, they cost even less, you know, so it's just like we have to put our money, you know, we have to put our money behind those efforts as well, not just solely, you know.
But so that's a twofold conversation, and it is, yes, as black folks, we have to invest in us, period. That ain't just politics, that's everything. Yeah. We need to do a better job investing in us.
In our products and services, where we buy our coffee, where we get our bikes. You were talking about bikes earlier, right?
I made it my business to get my bike from a black guy.
Power and black tees.
But the flip side of that, and to anybody that's watching that actually wants to run for something, we've already been trained to do more with less. So honor that, right? Like, don't get discouraged about the number. We've already been trained to do more with less. Every person, like if you just look at any industry in the world, black folks with half typically do more. It just is what it is. And so as we move forward, it's like...
But that's how it creates that beautiful creativity and innovation, all those constraints to create this blossom of all these unique things.
White people love soul food.
I was going to say, white people love soul food. White people soul food. You know what soul food is? Pig food? Soul food is us doing more with less. You know what I mean? Like hip hop. It's us doing more with less. So we're having a conversation about politics, we're talking about voting, but as a whole, and the one thing that I love about this moment that we're in, it's a sad moment because of what got us here. But the reality of this moment is